Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
Hello, good evening everybody. Welcome to Teachers Talk Radio. Thanks very much. If you're listening back to this, if you've clicked play on it, the recording of it, then thank you very much indeed for joining us as always on TTR for any and all of our shows. If you are unfamiliar with us, we are a online internet radio station dedicated to teachers. We have lots of shows. Some of them are pop-up spaces like this one. Others are through the Podbean platform. You can search for that on Teachers Talk Radio via Podbean. You can go to our website, ttradio.org. You can subscribe on there to the website and receive updates whenever we have new shows out. Coincidentally, I am following on from Hannah, who's just been on from 6 till, about 1 minute ago, actually, live. And this show is following on from hers. So if you want to listen back to hers at any point, maybe later on, I know she was talking all about art education. She is an art teacher. Then you can do that on the website. This show tonight from me, 2 topics tonight, really interested in both. The first one is the future of maths teaching. Now, the reason I've picked this is because of all the noise recently from both parties, actually, Conservative and Labour, about maths teaching. There seems to be a real focus on it within the political realm, but also beyond that, there's always been a focus on it within the teaching profession because there haven't been enough maths teachers. So it's going to be really interesting. I've got a special guest, Laurie, who's going to be joining me in a few minutes. He's a maths teacher and he's going to be sharing his thoughts on it all. But just to sort of outline what exactly I'm on about here, last week, the Labour government, not yet. The Labour opposition revealed their policy for maths. The headline being, Teach Primary Pupils Real-World Maths. Labour unveiled plans to teach real-world math skills in primary schools. And this was a policy unveiled by Bridget Phillipson, the Shadow Education Secretary, last week. And she talked extensively about this. And she said, for example, that there was a chronic cultural problem with maths. She said that if people hate maths at age 16, it's too late. She said, be it budgeting or cooking, exchange rates or pay slips, maths matters for success. Maths is the language of the universe, the underpinning of our collective understanding. It cannot be left till the last years of school. And then she moved on to talk about sort of how this real world maths might express itself. And I know that there was a reaction on social media, as there always is to these policy announcements, Many people were in favour, but those I saw in opposition were saying, well, is this going to lead to lessons for the sake of engagement and, maths lessons that are sort of centred on nice, fluffy, fun things rather than, actual sort of real maths, is what they would say, is what the critics would say. And those in support are saying, well, maths needs to be relevant, for the young people. It needs to be more relevant for the young people. And they need to feel a connection with it that is tangible. And to be fair, I think that applies to all subjects. I think that's a question that's being asked of all subjects. I think that we are in a place where sort of when it comes to the curriculum, when it comes to delivery, especially with the innovation leading from AI and machine learning and all these other things, people are starting to ask, how relevant is school? We've got record numbers of students not attending, record numbers being homeschooled, record numbers being educated elsewhere out of a mainstream classroom. And ultimately, this is like a big concern for people, and people are asking that question: what do we need to do to almost make this learning applicable to these students? Now, of course, there'll be other people who say it's nothing to do with that. This is about societal changes. This is about student behaviour. This is about lots of other things. It's not necessarily about lessons being more engaging or the curriculum being more engaging or anything else. But there's also those that are saying, no, this is about the curriculum. This is about what's being delivered. And we do need to consider those things. So I've got Laurie now joining me. Laurie, I'll just check that you can hear me. Are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Just about. Yeah, I can. How are you doing this evening?
Yeah, a bit tired. I've had a 6-period day at work, but I've got home, had a quick nap, so I'm all right now.
Well, that's amazing that you've decided after that you're going to talk to me about more maths after 6 periods of presumably teaching it. What were your 6 lessons like? If you were to rate each one out of 10, how did they go?
I would say it was the whole gamut from I've got like a set 6 out of 6 year 10 who can be lovely, and last week were fantastic, really, really good. And I thought, right, great, I've really sorted them out now. And then today we're back to being really just disengaged. So it's one of those classes that really hit or miss.
I mean, that's sort of just teaching, isn't it? What
it is everyone, isn't it? But I don't mind a class that's always like, if I kind of know what to expect. Anyway, so that was that one. And then I had a GCSE further maths class at the end of the day who were quite nice. And
out of your topic, out of your year groups that you teach maths to, what is your most favourite and least favourite year group to teach maths?
I've got a lovely because I previously taught A levels much more, so I come from sixth form background. So I've only worked in schools for like the last 4 years, and I really didn't think I would like year 7s and 8s, but actually I've got such a lovely year 7 class at the moment. They're just wonderful, and they're mixed ability as well. Like they all just work quite well together, and like kind of the good ones help each other, and they're so nice. Yeah, previously I always quite liked the kind of older ones, but this is kind of a bit sad. I've discovered my love of year 7s.
Yeah, but it's the sort of, can I turn the page and can I underline this thing on this page part that.
Oh, it's a bit of that, isn't it? Yeah.
But that's being cynical and negative. There will be many people out there who love the cute, adorable, like, oh, we love this and we're really enthused, and then there'll be others who are like, oh no, like I can't answer questions again about whether I should, take 2 breaths instead of 1 during the lesson. Do you know what I mean?
It's very that, yeah. Shall I underline in twice or once? It's yeah.
And as a teacher, Laurie, how long have you been going for now?
It must be almost 20 years.
Wow.
So I've only ever taught in my life, straight from university, and I'm not 20. It must be just yes. So I'm 40 at the moment, and I taught A levels for at sixth form college, and then I taught in FE for a decade. I was head of maths there, and then they kind of changed the role and put me in charge of head of maths and English, which was okay. But when you kind of do a job well and they reward you by giving you more work at a subject which is not your specialist, so it was a bit of that. And then I left. So when I was elected Southend Council, I started to step down from doing management, and now I'm working at school and I'm a lead practitioner in maths there. So I've been that for the last 4 years.
Now, out of all the years that you've been teaching, How would you rank sort of the last 12 months, 24 months within that spectrum? Would you say that it's sort of par? Would you say, yeah, I mean, the thing is, because you're an experienced teacher, perhaps it actually gets progressively slightly easier every year, regardless of what's going on outside. I just wondered where
Yeah,
you pitch
yeah.
that.
I found the most difficult year I've ever had was moving from teaching FE to going to a school. Because when you worked in FE or sixth form for like kind of 10 years, you get very used to it, very used to those kind of like style of children and stuff. And I kind of got very confident. I thought, God, I'm brilliant at behaviour management. I'm great. And actually, I went to work in a school and I thought, oh my God, there's so much I don't know. Like all the strategies I knew at FE, none of them worked. All the other kids were listening. And also going from like being a manager, I think kids are treating you quite well, and you kind of expect that's just skills you've got, and actually it's not. It's just what your job is. And then so that was I had a really tough year going, like kind of when I was going to school. But I think after that I've kind of got progressively more better since then. And I think every year I've had like a couple of tough class that are challenging and stuff, but I quite like that. You can get to, I find if you stay in the same place like too much, and every class is always like top set and like low. I don't know how people can do like grammar schools. Every class is lovely and stuff. I like that, but I like a bit of a challenger.
Yeah, you need a challenge in there somewhere. Yeah, I mean, what's your least favourite and most favourite a phrase? Whatever, your favourite part and your least favourite part of teaching?
I think the least favourite, I mean,
if there is one, perhaps it's just amazing all round. You know?
Yeah, anything where I can use like a good like Tasia activity or a matching activity or something like interactive or something kind of like any topic like that, I really like when you can do anything like investigative. Like the other day I did like pi, and it was like cutting out bits of string and measuring them and like doing that. And I think they found that really interesting. Anything you can kind of add that to.
Yeah.
I think when it's stuff that is on the syllabus and you don't really quite think it. What's the point of it? The kids are going like, what's the point? So I think that's when it's a bit I find some of the new GCSE content, like with lower groups, like when they're trying to do like I don't know, some of the hard like trigonometry and stuff, and it feels like kind of you do it, but it feels like it must be completely unsatisfying from their perspective that they've kind of got to do it, and actually it's sometimes might be better for them to practice more kind of.
Well, yeah, I mean, the reason I've asked you on is to talk about sort of the future of maths teaching, which I suppose ties in with lots of the wider issues in the education system, i.e. lack of maths teachers and lack of teachers in general. So we'll touch on that as well. But there were two big policy announcements. One from the Conservatives, which was about the provision of maths up to 18 and that becoming compulsory. And the one from Labour about teaching primary pupils, in inverted commas, real world maths. I wondered if you could tell me your take on both of those two policies.
Yeah, I'll start with the kind of Conservative one. I think it's obviously I've worked in FB for like a decade, and I think that obviously I think a lot of kids will get their GCSE and they're so proud of that, and that's brilliant for them. And then they can move on. Now, that's not to say they could like never do any maths after that. But I think if they then have to do, it's another qualification, you've got your GCSE, you've now got to do this, I think a lot of them are just going to lose interest, and they're going to lose buy-in, and they probably won't want to like do their course. I think they kind of, we've really worked towards this, and then, oh no, it's more of it. So I think there is a real danger that it's just kind of like, I don't know, rewarding kids for doing well, but then just giving them more to do, like another thing up. Whereas actually, I think kind of getting a GCSE for a lot of kids is really, really good. I think kind of obviously maths is important, but I think it should be kind of like embedded within the course so that they're not going in thinking, okay, I'm doing BTEC sports and then I've got my separate maths lesson where I'm doing this, and it's like not particularly relevant. I think to do it well, they should have the BTECs with the maths as part of it and always contextualized. And I think kind of my experience is some teachers will do that like really well. Like we had some really good like kind of engineering teachers or health and social care teachers who would always kind of be like pushing maths and getting the students to not only to do the GCSE and to do functional skills, but always to point out where it is relevant to, in their course. But I think it's not every teacher would do that. Not every teacher would have the skills to do it at a really good level. So I definitely think there's a kind of like gap there and a kind of a training need there for like some of those teachers.
Yeah. Do you think that, I mean, do you agree with Bridget Phillipson on this whole idea that, you know, there's a chronic cultural problem with maths in the UK?
I don't know if it's that if it's chronic. I think sometimes you do. I mean, I think sometimes like people later, like I'll talk to people like my age and stuff, or people are perfectly like adults. You probably know this. People go, "Oh, I was terrible at maths at school. I was awful at maths," and it doesn't like. It seems to be something that for certain people that there's no. I'm not saying they should be ashamed of that, but it's almost like kind of. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I don't think people much less would say, "Oh, I was terrible at spelling. Oh, I was rubbish at," like it's. So there definitely is something about in some kind of sectors of society. A lack of value in maths.
Do you think?
Sorry,
yeah, I mean, I just want to ask you, like, leading on from that, do you think that this idea of teaching real world maths is something that is a good thing? Like, do you think that's a good policy?
Yeah. Yes and no. I've got a bit of a story about this happening with one of my classes at the moment, which is obviously it's great when kids are saying, "Oh, why do we need this?" and you're kind of going, "Oh yeah, we need this kind of jobs and stuff, and this. I've got like one class, my kind of top set, year 11, so every single thing they do, pretty much, they're always like, "Oh, when are we going to use this?" And I kind of thought at the moment, why are you saying this? Like, I kind of say to them, well, like it's a maths qualification. Maths qualifications are going to help you in life, therefore it's good. But then they're kind of like getting progressively like less satisfied with that, and now they're kind of like homing on each topic, going like, "Oh right, well, trig equations. When are we going to use that?" And at first I thought. Like, I kind of can't make up my mind whether that's a really good thing that they're doing that, or actually whether it's just devaluing the maths for its own sake. So I've kind of been like, today we were doing like matrices, and they were saying like, "Oh, well, when would you use this?" And I was like, "Oh, actually, my friend works in computer games. Actually, when they use matrices, they're animating characters. The matrices is how the characters turn." And they feel like it was really interesting. But then they go, "Right, how exactly does that work?" So it kind of like it's getting to a level where I'm now needing to be so specific that I have to know about like various other like careers in like so much depth to kind of like keep them happy. So I kind of wish I just stopped. But anyway, so yeah, I think it's I think it's really good when kids ask that, and when teachers can say for specific things, yeah, okay, this is when you use it, etc., etc., and you're not just selling the qualification for its own sake and saying like kind of, "Oh yeah, you need to get your maths for such and such," because okay, for them kids that's going to motivate them. For some kids actually they quite like, I mean, different things motivate different kids, don't they? For some kids actually saying, "Well, this skill specifically is applicable in this way," that'd be good motivation for them. But yeah, I think I obviously try and make the content as much as kind of real world as possible. And I definitely think when we do stuff like kind of interest rates or mortgages or things like that, kids always find it. I always get a bit surprised because I would think kind of mortgages are so far off for them, or like kind of savings and stuff, actually, or pay and stuff. I mean, maybe it's like teaching like Essex. A lot of them are quite like they want to leave and they want to make a lot of money and stuff. So actually, they always find that kind of topics really kind of engaging. So yeah, on the whole, I think it's yes, teachers should make it really relevant and stuff, but I still think there are some things that actually is just good maths. You shouldn't have to like kind of dumb down. Actually, it shouldn't be wrong to say, okay, we're doing simultaneous equations today where one's quadratic, and kids shouldn't have the right to like, "Oh, well, when are we going to use this? And if I'm not going to use it, I'm not going to do it." Which, yeah.
Is there anything in your experience that makes students like maths more? In terms of just like, would you say this is just about good teaching, regardless of what the sort of content is or the curriculum is or the, whatever? Do you think that's sort of enough sometimes for them to like maths more? Or do you think actually, when it comes to the curriculum, for example, you've been teaching for a long time, what makes students like maths more?
Yeah, I've kind of come to have different thoughts on this, because I would always think that obviously you get some students who like the individual lesson, like if you're doing something really engaging and stuff, like that, they'll really enjoy it, and it's great. But I think that's true, like for that lesson. But it's something quite surprising, like how actually for some of them, although they're not kind of overly like hugely enthusiastic and they're not going to go out of the lesson cheering, like there was a kid who's normally just quite quiet, never really says very much, kind of not like kind of particularly engaged, very quiet, and his mum and him were coming around the open day for the sixth form, and she was like, "Oh, he thinks your lessons are fantastic," and they're really, and it's like, it was so surprising because this is the most like I would never have known that. Like, so I do think there are some kids who actually quite like just like a bit just classical, right? Oh, okay, here's the example, here's the practice and stuff, and they actually like quite enjoy it. They're never going to tell you. Like if it was a kind of a, obviously it was really like interesting lesson, something really, they might, oh yeah, that was really great. But for some of them, they're not going to say, but actually kind of like, it can be almost a bit like too much. And I've done that with some classes before where you just try and make it too, like I've got that with the year 7 sometimes, like I do like bingo sometimes, you know, like, I don't know, like maths box bingo. And it's like, you have to solve it. So it might be like a percentage, find 5% of something, they cross it off and they get it. And they really like it. But now they're kind of becoming a bit too demanding and they're like kind of, oh, we want to do bingo today, we want to do this. And it's just like, I kind of worried I kind of run the risk of like making it a bit too much fun, and then kids start thinking that every lesson is going to be fun, and actually sometimes they've got it, they should have that as an extra, but yes.
Yeah, I mean it comes back to those old sort of, and I hate these phrases, but and I do think there's a sort of a false dichotomy of this old idea of traditional teaching and progressive teaching and all that sort of stuff. But equally, you know, there is that element of, you know, there are some who will paint the whole idea of real world maths and yeah, let's try and make maths more engaging and more relevant as, you know, let's not fall into the trap of just sort of engagement for engagement's sake. But then equally, you know, I mentioned earlier the number of students who seem to be more disengaged with school as a concept, you know, forgetting about what's actually being taught within different subjects. You know, there's a lot more sort of disengagement in general with the idea of school, and you know, we've got unprecedented numbers of students who are not in school and are being home educated. So there is that strange mix between the two, but you know, and you've already answered this really, is that you think generally it's a positive thing to sort of make maths a bit more real world applicable. I mean, how other than what you said, which is like your sort of use of language and the way you interact with the students, what other ways do you make maths more relevant and more applicable to, in inverted commas, real life in your classroom?
I think whenever I was like doing I think there's lots of topics where you can, like if you were doing something like inverse apportion, like talking about like if you're building a house, having like fewer people there. Obviously, if you're having like fewer workers, it takes longer. I think most kind of topics you would want to do that. But I do think sometimes when you've got to prepare them for the exam, and the exam sometimes doesn't have that scaffolding, then they do need to like, I think sometimes you can run the risk of everything needs to have like scaffolding and everything needs to have like kind of all the different rates, and actually that's great, but you then need to kind of like strip it back, and they need to be able to just like solve an equation as an equation, not think about like just, oh, here's the balancing method and stuff. And like I did the other day, like with this for the year 7s who are, when they're first meeting balancing equations, like I had like packets of sweets, and you can go like, well, there's X sweets in the packet, and I've never done this before, really kind of in this exact way. And then you could like, so I had like a balance, and you like Frutellers, you know, those, so you can't really tell how many are in, but you can balance it and say, right, there's his. So they found it really interesting. And actually I heard something, oh God, they finally like that's I think they kind of understood it. But then you've then got to think, well, they then need to be able to do ones where it's negative X on the other side, and they can't then, like, you can't have a negative sweep, that doesn't work. So you can't only rely on that. They need to kind of like, then extrapolate from that. But we're doing at the moment, do you know, like the White Rose curriculum?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
So that's really good, and it's really kind of like we do for like Key Stage 3, and it's so like, and it really kind of like makes you actually explain everything properly. It's loads of like bar modeling, loads of like kind of explaining the first principles, loads of explaining something like 2 or 3 different ways, and it's great. I mean, it takes you a while. Like if you're used to teaching kind of like more didactic, it takes a lot of planning, especially like to understand like what exactly like the sequence. The sequence is great, but you really need to think about why they've sequenced it in that way.
Yeah.
But that's really good, and that's really interesting. And it's so many more kind of like questions where it's like misconceptions. Where have they gone wrong? And what's the reason they've gone? What's the misconception the students made? Or like, can you think of an example yourself? Why is this like doing like kind of even for like year 7 to year 8? It's like, oh, why is this a counterexample to this? Which is something that normally you wouldn't even introduce that kind of until much later. But it's really going to get them to think about the kind of language of maths much earlier on. So that's kind of, I think, having an impact. So I think if more schools, and certainly in primary as well, we're kind of starting to, and this probably brings me back to Bridget Phillips' point about kind of, we're starting to use that kind of method and really kind of like make it more deep, the learning. So we're really kind of understanding the concepts from a younger age, because I think kind of at primary, obviously we take from a lot of different primary schools, and it's so different. I think some of them really come in with a deep understanding and actually understand like what fractures, what percentages, and but others who it's really shallow, and they haven't met any kind of algebra seemingly at all, or like they didn't even know what a negative number is, whereas some of them are quite much more confident with that. So I do think there's probably quite a gap at the moment.
Do you think that, I mean, do you sort of think like what Bridget Phillipson was saying, like, oh, if it's far too late by towards the end of secondary or GCSE or whatever, we need to sort of catch them early, if you like, with maths and get them to like it much earlier on. Do you sort of agree with that? I mean, I wonder whether neither myself or yourself are primary teachers. It'd be interesting to hear, what a primary teacher thought about that. But, I guess what I'm asking is, where is it, if you believe that Bridget Phillipson is correct when she says there is this big cultural problem with maths and people end up disliking maths. I mean, I hated maths, right? I'll be honest. I despised it. My mum is a maths teacher. Or was a maths teacher. She's retired now.
That's really interesting. Yeah.
So she was a maths teacher, and I specifically remember during the period where I was revising for GCSE, she could not get me to sit with her and for her to help me. I hated it that much that I wouldn't even have my personal tutelage from a maths teacher at home. Like I was like, no. Like I was just...
Looking back now, do you think there's stuff that your teachers could have done differently, or was it just like,
in all fairness, Laurie, like in the school I was in, well, first of all, I don't know how your school does it, but in my school it was setted.
Right.
For math. I'm guessing it is that way in a lot of schools still for maths and whatever, but some schools not. But in my school it was setted, and I was in the, in inverted commas, bottom set. I was in set. It was either set 4 or 5, and it was so maths was taught by a non-specialist. So straight away, it was a PE teacher who blatantly did not want to be there. Right.
It's so frustrating when schools do that. Like, you should give like your best teachers like the lower sets, because you really need the skills to like engage like students who are not particularly strong at maths and a bit resistant. Like, that's a real skill. Like, it's really, that's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah, this is it. And I don't blame that teacher, because at the time I might have been like, oh, this is not good. But later on, once I was a teacher, I was like, well, I don't blame that teacher, because that's not what they want to be doing. And they were probably sitting there going, oh God, this is the lesson I don't want to go to. because it's almost like, I don't know, like I think that's part of a wider thing, but I just never, I'm not a numbers person anyway, not a numbers person. But then equally, this is what other people would say is, well, how did you decide you're not a numbers person? Like, when did that happen? When did you? So, for example, now, sometimes people are like, oh, you're really good at mental arithmetic, right? So if I'm good on, I do things quite fast when it comes to like adding things together, subtracting, whatever, dividing, things like that in my head, right? So, but that was never ever identified. That was never ever, oh, you're good at mental arithmetic or whatever. And that's only been the last few years that I've sort of realized that I'm all right at that side of things.
I think there's probably,
but the confidence
I do wonder what
gone. Laurie,
I think
this is turning into a massive counselling session. You're probably going to charge me like, this is like mathscounselling.com. That's probably a site that exists, which we are not.
I find it fascinating. I find it really fascinating. The kind of
this is a great time for me to say John Catt is back. Sorry, I've been waiting to say that all day. Because John Catt are once again partnering with Teachers Talk Radio, and they have a page which is called For the Maths Department. Laurie, have you ever visited this page?
I think I have, actually, yes.
Yes, they have got 16 books on here for the maths department. Now, as a TTR listener, you, Laurie, or any other maths teacher can get 20% off any of the books on that page by using the code JCTTR2324. That's JCTTR2324. I'm sure Nathan will pin that or tweet it or something to tell people. But basically, if you visit johncattbookshop.com and if you go to For the Maths Department, or any other department actually, because this offer applies to any book on johncattbookshop.com. But for maths teachers or anyone interested in maths, you've got 16 titles on there, and you can get 20% off any book on there by using that code. So definitely check that out. And John Catt is back. I think that should be a rock song by somebody. So anyway, I was going to ask you, because we're sort of moving towards the end of the chat, unfortunately, because literally we could probably talk about this all day, and I definitely need more maths counselling. But what is the future of maths teaching when it comes to AI? Like, do you think that... Like I know we had a few shows last week actually on TTR from Lucy, and a couple of other people have talked about it, but AI and sort of teachers being replaced by robots. I know that's Brent was talking about that on Thursday. Do you sort of worry that maths is a subject where it could be more easily roboticized?
Oh God, I didn't. But now you said that, maybe I should be. Maybe I should have a job. I think there are some really good programs you can get that like kind of do a lot of kind of like machine learning and kind of help kind of kids, and then will then give them back like the same style of problems and stuff. But like we used to use like Hegarty Maths, which was quite good, and then it would give kind of like kids like more practice and stuff and what they need to. I hopefully not like. I think all of those tools are there, and I think kind of they are great. But I still think that I find it hard to think that there would be ever a place without a teacher. But I suppose it kind of relates to the number of kids who are not attending, and obviously some of those are being homeschooled and probably the parents doing a great job. I mean, there's quite a growing cohort of kids who either got like anxiety or mental health or something else who aren't able to engage in school. So I do think if it creates options for them, then that's really good.
Like, do you think that, for example, with ChatGPT, for example, you could say this about every subject that exists in school, right? You probably could come up with a similar question. But in maths, like the maths teacher always said, show you working out. Yeah?
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, and they always say, like, oh, show you working out. With AI, you'd not only be able to get the answer, like with Google, if you Google what is 2 times 5 minus 28 or something, it'll tell you the answer, but it won't show the working out. Whereas with ChatGPT and AI now, we're probably moving to a point where you could say, can you show how you've worked that out? Can you show an alternative way of working that out? Can you show whatever? Now, that doesn't mean they'd have understood it when it appears on the screen, as they wouldn't if they Googled it, to be fair. But it's just an interesting thing to throw in there, is like, how can AI, how do you foresee, and maybe you haven't thought about it, but how do you foresee AI changing maths teaching in particular?
I hadn't really thought about it.
You can go and reflect. You're going to need counselling.
Yeah,
that'd
be part two. I think things like that. I think when you, I don't know. I think when you get to like, obviously, like university level maths, like it's not kind of like, there's kind of a beauty in like the way you lay it out. And I think there's probably stuff that like university level maths would do. But I don't think it's just, I think the maths isn't just learning the process. Obviously that is what a lot of like GCSE is, and there's going to be a lot of like GCSE questions or even any questions where it's just boom, then boom, then boom, then boom, then boom. But like there will be the ones that are much more interesting, where actually you've got to try, it's at the level where you've got to try different things, you've got to see what works, you've got to like investigate. So I think things like that, I think there'll always be a place. I think the need for like the human, I think, would always kind of outrun, maybe I'm a bit of an idealistic here, or comes this the philosophy, will always kind of outrun what AI can do. But maybe
absolutely. Kind of, I completely
familiarised with right AI, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, AI is never going to be able to replicate the human to human idea of teaching, which has been around since the dawn of time. AI is never going to be able, it may get close to doing it, because obviously it'll eventually become physical beings, robots or clones of people, who will be able to teach in the style of whoever it is. But that's not necessary. Even that isn't going to replace the emotional human connection that a human being can have with another human being. It's never going to replace that. But it does throw up sort of the question of how far can it sort of replace or replicate. And I gave you that my experience of maths in school. Would I have preferred a clone of you, Laurie, as opposed to the sort of non-specialist, non-engaged teacher who didn't really want to be there and had been given the bottom set? Given the choice, would I prefer a clone of Laurie instead of that? Something, because in my head, I might be thinking, as a student in that class, I might be thinking, well, I'm not really interested in building a relationship with this teacher because I hate the subject, and it's not something I want to continue doing after I'm 16, blah 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 blah. So actually, I'm going to choose the AI robot replica of Laurie, as opposed to what I'm getting, which I'm not feeling is helping me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think probably, I'll probably go for yes. I mean, I think kind of obviously the emotional connection is really important, and obviously with like kids who are really struggling, having the teacher goes, "Yeah, I believe in you. Well done. You've gone really well." Actually, that's probably, I would have thought that's probably not the same as having someone automatic do it. But actually, you know what, kids are like getting that emotional connection their whole lives, for a lot of them, not by interacting with people. So they're probably quite used to having emotional connections with kind of apps and apps that they don't know, and it's not real life. So I think given that they've been kind of what's the phrase, so used to kind of getting emotional connections through online and through people that are not kind of humans in the real world, then I think it probably
Have you noticed more students wanting an online experience or to be at home rather than be in school in your lessons, like since COVID, or not? Or have you just not really noticed much different?
I think some kind of, I don't know, I think there's a bit of like a fallacy sometimes where people think, oh, well, kids always use their mobile phones, therefore we should use more like IT and teaching. Like there was a bit of that at like my old college, and I was kind of thought, well actually, they do, but they don't always, like actually they quite like we're quite now, but we always were quite strict on phones. and things like that. And actually, I think they quite like, although they won't admit it, putting it away and being able to like focus on stuff. Whereas I think if we had, I know people at schools where they use like laptops and stuff, or maybe they're not as strict, or the kids can have their phone out. I think they're just focusing less. I think it's just making it too easy for them to have that kind of like short-term stimulus of their phone, even having the phone there. But do you mean like if they, like in terms of, are they wanting more online?
I mean, like,
practice
have you
things,
noticed?
or...
Like, obviously, there's a huge increase in school refusal, in students actually, and a proportion of those are actually preferring to not be in a classroom environment. They want to be, online at home. They want to be out of that school environment. They prefer a different sort of experience, whether that's because of the anxiety of being in there, or whether that's because they've just got used to an online diet over during COVID, or whether that's whatever. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we're using some of, those like robots things. Have you seen those?
I haven't got any robots in my house, Laurie, yet. Although we
Oh,
have
right.
talked about cloning you, which could happen sometime soon. So watch out.
Yeah. So I don't know. So it comes in and it sits on the desk while the kid's not there.
What?
And have you not seen this?
No.
Have you really not? Okay. So it's like a little like white kind of gizmo. Yeah, the robot's kind of made something right, and it sits on the desk. And then the kid can log on at home and they can watch the lesson through the robot.
Oh, that's me.
And like they can, I've only had like one in my class like once, but then they can also light up like to say like yes or no. So the robot can like give you, I mean they can't. It's not like a whole microphone system. They can't talk through the robot, but like they can do signals and stuff. So I think that's quite cool. I think for a student who is like got real anxiety. And actually, it's a choice between them sitting at home doing nothing, or actually they can watch the lesson through that, and they can move it as well. I think they can like move on. I think that's a really good,
I mean, I don't think it's ever the same. I think there's a level of discomfort about being in a classroom and in school. That like, it's not something that necessarily a lot of people would want to do, unless, I mean, of course, it may. There's obviously a proportion who would, but I'm saying, like, generally speaking, like, I don't know, particularly teenagers. I'm not a primary school teacher. I'm sure. Well, when I was in primary school, I think more kids wanted to be in school than not. But I think progressing through into secondary school, they become teenagers, and I don't know. There is anxiety there about having to go into a classroom and maths. I don't know. Is maths a subject that induces more anxiety than maybe other subjects because it requires like there's less chance for exploration in maths? So, like, I'm talking for me now, right? I, for example, would feel much less anxious or sense of dread about an art lesson. Hannah's here, so I haven't just said that because Hannah's walked in and she's a head of art. I'm not sucking up to you, Hannah, because you're an art teacher. But when I was in school, I felt much more ease about going into an art lesson because I'd be able to almost create something without the pressure of it always being wrong, right? Whereas in maths, it's like, no, I think that's right. Like the whole thing is right, wrong. Like English, write a poem. Well, okay, I can write a poem. Might not be the best poem in the world, but it's almost like there isn't a wrong answer with poetry. Does that make sense? Like
It makes complete sense.
Out loud now.
I think a lot of kids have the misconception that if you go wrong at something, that's an indication that you're bad at maths. Whereas you need to kind of drill this out of them and like make it. And sometimes when I go wrong, sometimes I go that often, and the kids, you made a mistake. And it's like, yeah, I'll make a mistake occasionally, like people do. Like, whereas actually, like what they don't seem to realize is that when you do like university maths or like famous or mathematicians or like beyond that, they're constantly trying things and it's going wrong. they might spend years on a problem and it's about, no, this isn't wrong. And I don't think kids like understand that that's what maths is. Maths is a constant like kind of trying things are going wrong and then you discover something and then you move on to something else. They just think of it as like it's all just which I suppose it is kind of to them, though it's presented, isn't it? It's all just like problem solving. Like it's all just like questions that they're doing to practice and build the skills. But what I think you kind of need to realize is that that's not really maths. That's like practice. Like the maths is the actual thinking, and when you're thinking, if you're never going wrong on anything, then it's just far too easy.
Yes.
Like so. I think they should understand that, and that's at all levels. Sometimes you get those very high achieving kind of classes where someone doesn't want to make a mistake, or someone makes a mistake and it's all like it, and it can be not very like supportive, and you need to train them and go, no, like they had a go. Yeah, they've made a start using that language of misconceptions. Yeah, that's a misconception, but that's really good. We're going to learn from that because other people have made that as well. So what can we do to avoid making those misconceptions in the future, like, and turn it into a positive? But that doesn't, I don't think that comes naturally to a lot of kids. They're not kind of like trained in like that way of thinking. And then certainly like for lower ability ones, they can be like really reluctant to have a go. Like it's like there's this one kid in my class who's the starter of every lesson. I'll put up some questions and he's like, no, I want some easier, and I'll have to write something like so basic. And I thought, well, this is great for you, like you're doing it, but you're not, like, you're just doing what you can do anyway. Like you're not ever pushing yourself to do anything different. So now I thought, no, I'm not doing that anymore. You can have a go at the questions. If you kick off, you kick off, but at least you're kind of like having like you're being challenged, and I'm not just like pandering to
which is sort of like, oh my god, one of my ex-maths teachers is here.
No. What are the odds?
Well, actually, I think he taught me in maybe year 9. Hello, Mr. O'Leary. Hello, everyone. Look at Mr. O'Leary. Like, don't worry, Mr. O'Leary. They can't really look at you because you're just like an icon on the screen. But hello. But Mr. O'Leary was actually great. He wasn't I can't say the name of the teacher I was referring to earlier, because he'll know who it is. But it wasn't him. But Mr. O'Leary was great. But like I feel as though like it would be nice to ask because Mr. O'Leary, God knows what he looks like now, because he was teaching me like 30 years ago or something. But he must be, if he's still teaching maths, which he probably is, then he's probably like, oh my God, help me. But we've just been talking about the future of maths teaching. And what's interesting is that, coming back to what you were saying there about the problem solving, like I didn't like having, maybe out of laziness or out of fear, but I didn't like the idea it would take me 10 steps to even have a chance of solving a problem, right? Whereas in art or English, like history's facts, right? I mean, okay, yes, I understand disciplinary concepts and substantive concepts and all these different things, yes. But history to me made sense because it's like the study of history is it's different, right? Whereas maths and science, it was more like you've got to, to be able to solve a problem, it's like this daunting hill that you've got to climb up. And I just, out of laziness and fear and lack of confidence, I didn't want to do that. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. You get different types. You get some people who love the kind of like investigativeness of it, and they're kind of like always, oh, why are we doing something? And then you get some who are like, kind of, oh, just tell me the answer. I don't want to do this. I know where this is going. Just tell me the answer now. But I think you'd hope that. I think they need to realise that like actually what maths is thinking. Like it's not just subbing into a formula, and it's not just kind of like just following a process. Like there is this like other level to it as well. Like the kind of like actually this is a new concept. This is doing a different way. This is taking those skills and applying it in a different way. So yeah, I think that kind of I think sometimes the kind of curriculum can be a bit too much. Oh, we're doing this, we're practicing, then we're doing this, then we're practicing, then we're doing this, and actually teachers don't often find enough time to just think, okay, I'll just take 2 lessons, we'll just investigate this is interesting. Like
yeah, I mean there's a lot more probably prescription than there was in the 90s or early 2000s. When I started teaching, there was in 2007, there was a bit of prescription. Like we had the 4-part lesson, for example, like, oh, you should have a starter and you should have a demonstration, activation, plenary, whatever, right? There was the 4-part lesson. There was things like that knocking around, but it was never as like if you deviate from these sort of scripted responses or more prescribed activities, then that's not good. That's not like research informed. That's not whatever. Right? It was more like, I would say it was maybe a bit more free. I don't know if that's a good or bad thing. My hunch is that it was a better thing to have that level of freedom. That's my hunch. But equally, perhaps things have progressed in the sense of this is what works. I mean, with your maths lessons, do you feel that over the time you've been teaching, 16, 17 years, 20 years, however long it was, do you feel you've become more systematic?
Yeah, I think kind of, because I think when you're also a marker as well, I think that influences I've marked A-level and I marked GCSE, but I think that influences your teaching, because you know exactly the misconceptions and get straight to it. And there's certain things where I've always steered away from teaching shortcuts that have no, I had one. I don't know if so if you're factorizing harder quadratics.
I don't know that, Laurie, but it sounds
okay. So when you put stuff when you put stuff in brackets, okay, and it's the hard ones, there's a shortcut way of doing it, which the kids can get, but it has no explanatory power, right? It's just a shortcut. They don't understand why they're doing it. It's just one of these steps, get it. But there's another way to do it, which is slightly more long-winded, but each step makes sense mathematically. You do this, then you do this, then you do this. And yet you get the same answer at the end. I always teach the more longer version, because I just think it's so unsatisfying just to go, oh, well, we do this, it's following steps. And they get the answer, but they don't really kind of understand it. So I've always been a bit that in the past. I've kind of changed my mind a bit this year with certain groups. So we do this thing called DM Horseshoe, which is for proportion. So it's all things like kind of when you have, if you had 3 pens cost £5, how much would 7 pens cost? That. So they get it the right way. It's like a step-by-step thing. So they just draw it on a table and then go divide, then multiply. And it's not really explaining the concepts as well, because you want to explain it as going times up, or find out what 1 pen cost. But actually, for weaker students who just cannot visualize the kind of maths around it, actually having that as well is a bit of a kind of, because at least they can feel satisfied that they can apply it in different ways to get an answer. Whereas actually, if they're so unsatisfied that the maths is almost quite hard, then they kind of tune off it, if it makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I used to love those ones. I had a vague memory of this where it was in brackets and then it was just so obvious the equals. It's 2 + 1 in a bracket. Oh, it's 3, and I was like, oh mate, give me every lesson, every maths lesson, just make it like this. Laurie, we have run out of time on maths. I mean, I could talk to you about this all day long. It's been an amazing counselling experience.
No, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
You've helped me to reconcile my hatred when I was 13 of maths with sort of modern times. So I really appreciate
they might ask you to teach a lesson in something coming up. We're so desperate. We need to be recruiting stuff from other subjects. You never know.
Mate, I will be that PE teacher who just didn't want to teach maths. Don't
say it. They'll be listening.
No, well, someone is listening who will know that teacher, which is hilarious. But they're not that teacher. They were actually pretty good and solid. But yeah. Hilarious. Anyway, Laurie, stick around if you want, right? Because I'm talking to Dan next. Dan, I'll just check you can hear me. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly clearly. Just before I talk to Dan, and by the way, everybody, you want to stick around for this because Dan has moved from teaching to working in an Amazon warehouse.
In today's educational environment, students and teachers are juggling a mix of face-to-face, online and blended learning courses. Canvas by Instructure helps teachers navigate these diverse learning experiences with a user-friendly virtual learning environment that offers flexible access to courses and a consistent learning experience, all while streamlining everyday teaching processes. The world's best schools and universities are using Canvas to create dynamic courses, collaborate seamlessly, and access actionable data that drives student success.
Are you looking for lesson planning materials to kickstart the new term? We've got you covered. The Day is a global online resource that turns the news into lessons. We're offering listeners a free resource on Andrew Tate that you can find on thedaynews.co/Tate. Inspire personal development and critical thinking for your students by downloading the Tate Debate today and feel more confident addressing sensitive topics with your class. Visit thedaynews.co/Tate to find out more.
This show is brought to you in partnership with John Catt Educational, publishing professional development books and resources to support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. Have you checked out their latest releases? Use the code JCTTR2324 for 20% off your order. Don't miss out. Visit johncattbookshop.com to explore their full range of titles and advance your own professional development today. Happy reading.
And he is so much happier. In fact, he sent me a lesson, not a lesson, he sent me a DM earlier with a picture of the warehouse with him stood in front of it, like waving happy. He didn't go that far, but he is genuinely happier warehousing than he was in the classroom. So I can't wait to speak to you, Dan. Just before I ask Dan his story as how this came about, I should remind all our listeners that if you visit johncattbookshop.com, John Catt is back. That's how the song goes. Then you can get 20% with TTR off any John Catt book. You can go on there. You can use the code JCTTR2324. If you add that when you check out, we've tweeted it in the space, you can get 20% off any book at johncattbookshop.com. You can explore their full range of titles, including their maths titles. If you want to get better at maths teaching, then they've got a section that says for the maths department. So definitely check that out. Anyway, Dan, how are you this evening? Are you okay?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you for having me on.
Mate, thank you for saying you'd come on, because it's so interesting. So, I tweeted earlier about people who've left teaching and done something else and whatever, and you replied saying you moved from teaching into working in an Amazon warehouse. So I was wondering, tell us the story of teaching to Amazon warehouse.
But it was slightly unexpected in some ways, but I have been in teaching until last summer. I'm a primary teacher, and I taught for 24 years, and ended up being the head teacher of a small primary school, where I still had a teaching commitment every week, and still taught a year 3 and 4 class for a day, and then dotted around the rest of the school. I genuinely thought I was probably going to be a lifer, that I was going to carry on until I was pretty much 60. But things changed. I think it's not just due to COVID. I think there have been changes in education, which I don't think are for the better. But what I'm going to say is from my perspective, it's kind of like my lived experience. I know it may not be the same as others, and I do want to make clear that I have no particular axe to grind, Tom. I'm not a member of a political party, and I never have been, and I'm sure I never will be. But I was someone who I don't. It sounds like you, from the conversation before with your mum being a maths teacher, there is a genetic side to teaching, isn't there?
Well, my dad was a teacher as well. He was history. So,
yeah,
and my grandparents, and every single one of my uncles and aunties, and basically everybody. Which is
there's no escape, really, is there? I mean,
there was never going to be an escape.
My mum was a primary teacher. My dad, for a short time, was actually a secondary maths teacher. My aunt was a teacher. My wife was a teacher for quite a while. It was something that I kind of slightly avoided until I felt it was right for me. And this is probably the same for many teachers, is that the reason I got into it was because of my teachers at school. I look back and I think back to Miss Hayden, Mr. Baker, and Mr. Gross, who were my junior teachers, and I just loved school at that stage. So eventually went into it in the late 90s. I taught in inner city Bristol. I taught in suburban Gloucester. I taught in a small market town in Wiltshire, and I finished up by teaching in 2 village primaries in Gloucestershire. One where I was deputy head for nearly 10 years, and one where I was a teaching head for just over 7 years.
So
And
why did you quit then? Tell us the process up to quitting teaching. Like what
the process?
Yeah.
The process up to quitting teaching was I, having gone into school leadership, so I'm doing it from this perspective. I have actually felt, and I've seen a difference in the way things have changed over the last quarter of a century, and largely, I have to say, Tom, it was a case of feeling disrespected, of feeling disrespected as an individual,
Yeah.
and feeling disrespected as a profession.
Yeah.
There were flashpoints. Really, I mean, a lot of us obviously found COVID extremely testing, particularly as school leaders. And there was a period through there where, quite frankly, some of the things coming from the Department for Education were disrespectful. We would be getting no notice of things. We would be getting new documents coming through which were 40 pages long. We'd be getting them on a Friday night, ready to implement on a Monday morning. So, you can talk as much as you like about well-being and work-life balance, but when you're getting that dumped on you at 7 o'clock on a Friday evening, and you have to have that in place on a Monday morning, that's difficult. So there were things that were sort of COVID related, really, but also, I've seen over time things like, the way that CAMS and the SEND support has been stripped away, almost systematically over the last decade, and how much schools and particularly school leaders are taking on things that are quite frankly really shouldn't be in their remit. That was something I found extremely difficult. I personally found Ofsted very difficult. I've been through 5 or 6 in my time. Some of them have been positive, but some, a small primary school where the lead inspector was a secondary school specialist who had never taught primary and had never been in the hot seat.
Yeah.
So there's a feeling of disrespect that goes on, and it's general. I look at, I'm in contact with some of my colleagues, and I despair for them at the moment when it comes to budgets. But I can remember the days where you used to know your budget back in February, and you could set your budget, and there's the whole ethos has changed. Where, Tom, what is 80% of any school's budget? It's the staff, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's your staffing costs, and you can get to you get to the end of the summer term, which is 4 or 5 months into the financial year, and you still don't know your staffing costs. So that means over the summer holiday, you and your finance officer or whoever it is have to work on it and try and square the circle, because you've employed staff for September.
Yeah.
So there's things like that which the way that support has been stripped out, particularly in things like CAMS and SEND, the way that I think that school leaders are being treated. I actually, I found that it was disrespectful, and it really wasn't good for my mental health at the time. I'm quite open about the fact that the last 6 months that I was ahead, I was there on antidepressants. I was just about getting through, and as soon as I had stepped away from the job and I had nothing to go to, I'm 51. People keep asking me, "Oh, how are you finding retirement?" And I'm thinking, "My goodness, do I look that old?" But I stepped away, and as soon as that happened, the pressure of the stress of the job just melted away almost instantly, and then my new adventures began.
Well, that was, I mean, yeah, you've really sort of hit on so many different pinch points there of why people quit, or the journeys people go on towards quitting. But I suppose to throw that in as well, a lot of what you said there, surely that was there when you started anyway. if that makes sense. Like, there must have been some things that got much worse. I mean, you've sort of touched on that, I guess. You've said that, you know, the cams and the sort of lack of support on send and, you know, whatever. But there's some things there that you discussed that you'd imagine would have been there since you started.
I think, yeah. I mean, things did change. There was a point where lots of money was being pumped into education, and then it felt that things were being cut back. I wasn't just working within like the bounds of my own school. I used to work with the local the university on the primary partnership board, training students. So I saw what was going on with them. I was also a member of the schools forum, which basically liaised with the county council that we had, which was to do with schools budgets. And I saw the pressure that particularly SEND and special schools were under. And I think, you know, from about, I'm guessing sort of 2015, 16, I did notice things get significantly worse. Yeah, I'm sure there always were problems before.
Yeah.
But it felt that more and more is going onto the shoulders of people in schools, more and more responsibility, with less and less resources going in that direction. And personally, it's not just me. I think I was working within a cluster of small village schools, and there were 6 schools, 5 of which had substantive heads, 1 which shared with someone else. But in 2020, all 5 of those heads left.
Wow.
And only 1 of them was a genuine retirement.
So how do you replace that then? How did they replace that?
Well, they have replaced them, and good on the people coming in. And one of them was my deputy.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm so glad that she stepped up. And there were others that came in as well. But you know, I think what happened is people got through the pandemic as it was in school, you know, 2020, 2021. And by 2022, you know, there's a lot of people that were pretty exhausted. And it was felt like we've steered the ship through, but no more.
So you decided to obviously leave, and can you talk me through the bit when you actually said I'm off, and what was the reaction to that when you did that? And then I want to know sort of the path between that and ending up working in an Amazon warehouse.
Yeah, I mean, I was so lucky that I had a fantastic governing body at school. My chair of governors, she was absolutely marvelous, and the staff in many ways were not relieved that I was going. I don't think I was that much of a pain in the neck to them, but they were kind of relieved that I had made the decision, because they could see that it was taking its toll on me. And I felt that for the last 5 months that I was there, I was able to enjoy myself. I was going to go back to the core purpose, which was the children and the staff team, and not be distracted by some of the other things that were going on around. So, you know, we carried on taking the school forward, but then it was a case of I felt that I left the school in a better place than it had been when I'd taken over 7 years before. And then I just took some time. You know, fortunately with teaching, you know, you do get the holidays, and I had the summer holiday in 2020 to look at jobs, and decide that actually, you know, what I was going to do is I was going to take something on. I applied for several jobs, and I want to talk really about you know, the whole transferable skills in a minute that many teachers do have. But I decided that when a couple of things hadn't worked out, I was going to take on something to pay the bills, and that thing was working nights in a warehouse.
Wow.
And I mean, I come from my education is very middle class, but I come from you know, originally a working class background. I was actually with my uncle the other day, yesterday, and he used to work nights delivering from Mother's Pride. So that kind of thing is not you know, alien to me. So, but having gone in, the freedom that I had in working there, has just been a bit of a revelation. And people turn around to me and say, "Oh, it sounds like they're an awful, organisation to work for." And I honestly say to them, I feel that I'm treated with more respect, 10 times more respect than I was, particularly by the powers that be in education. And I have applied for other jobs. I have looked at other jobs, because my wife has really kind of blazed the trail for me. She was an infants teacher, Key Stage 1 teacher, and early years. And she left the profession in 2016 and has gone on to work in the charity sector. And she currently works as medical secretary and is absolutely loving it. The NHS has its own difficulties and stresses, but it's very different. So I could see what she'd done. I think the thing, I was talking with her earlier before coming on here, and as teachers, it is true that we have many, many transferable skills, and they can be used in all sorts of ways. Our communication, our way of thinking, our work ethic as teachers is high, and she has particularly found that the skills that she had have been easy to move across. I have found that actually some employers in different fields are less willing to take a chance. It may be because I'm into my 50s now, less able to take a chance. But actually going to work on what was purely a temporary basis for up until Christmas, just to tide me over, has been a real eye opener.
Do you feel like, I know you talked about the lack of respect and so on and so forth, but is it also about the stress as well? Is it about that day-to-day stress? Because no matter, for me, I'm still teaching part-time. I've been teaching since 2007. It's never really bothered me. I say it hasn't bothered me. Obviously, it's annoyed me what the government what different governments have said and done, and sort of, whatever it is, right? The things they've said or the way I've felt when they've said them. But when I go into work, it's almost like that part is just, I'm too concentrating on what I need to do in front of me. What led to me quitting teaching twice? The first time in 2015, I thought that was going to be terminal. I thought that was it. And actually what happened is I was out for maybe 5-6 months, and then I got a job full-time in an international school in Spain, which I loved, absolutely loved it. And then I left that school to another school, which was in a different way, like very, very tough. And I then left that school. But to be fair, that second time, I didn't think I was leaving teaching. I was just leaving that school. And then since then, I've had lovely sort of, temporary contracts, a maternity contract, part-time contract, and that's pretty much 2019 to now. But for me, when I wanted to quit in 2015, it was about the stress I felt on a day-to-day. And it wouldn't matter really to me what the policies were, although it had to be said, some people dealt with those policies in a bad way. They sort of made those policies even worse than they already were. But ultimately, it was about the demands of the job when you were in there.
Yeah, and there were certain aspects of it that always were hard. I think because I'm seeing this from a school leadership perspective, I know that many people would be thinking about this. One of the things that may be most problematical for people is relationships with senior leadership teams, senior management teams in school. That they are the ones who are perhaps having the stress from above, but a lot of people who are working in the classrooms, who have got the face-to-face role, it is the problem actually the profession of teaching, or is it the context and the culture of where you are at the moment? I found it really interesting to hear you talk about international schools, and Is it the local context of the school that I'm in? Is there something going on? Do I not like the atmosphere? Do I not like the culture and ethos? Is there a problem with the senior leadership team? Is there bullying going on? You know, is it a case that I just need to? I still love teaching. I still want to teach, and my option is, if as best as I can, to do it somewhere else, whether it's on a local basis or whether, as you've talked about, whether it's on an international basis. Is that is the problem with my location rather than my profession, or is it with the profession itself, and that I just can't carry on doing this?
I think more people in the UK, and I have to say England in particular, because I've also taught in Wales, and that was different to England. But let's say England in particular, there is a proportion of people, particularly at leadership level, who for whatever reason buy in more to the messaging.
Yeah.
And when they buy into that messaging about outcomes and standards and Ofsted and whatever the messaging is, and that messaging is a bombardment. To be fair to them, it's not as if there's a day that goes by when they're not being bombarded. Absolutely. You've been a school leader, so you know this even better than I do. But I can imagine that it's a bombardment of messaging. But equally, there are those in England and the UK who will buy into that messaging, and what that then means is that pressure is passed down the chain.
Absolutely.
And in international schools, that simply, generally speaking, isn't the case. There are many reasons for that. There are many reasons for that. One is, of course, that they can't just sort of. It's a different model. The best way I can put it is, when I moved to Spain, me trying my best was more than enough.
Yeah.
And I didn't feel like that in the UK. I felt like a lot of the time, I felt like my superhuman efforts were still not enough.
Yeah.
And that then, of course, leads to burnout.
Yeah.
And eventually, because you can only sustain that for a certain amount of time. And when I went to Spain and taught in this international school, British international school, it was a good school, by the way. It wasn't as if suddenly the sort of professional standards went out of the window. And what it said to what it sort of said to me was, it is possible. What happens in the UK is not what. When I was in the UK, it's almost as if I considered that to be what had to happen for things to work. And once I went international, had that experience, and also the experience of the few months I had prior to that when I was exploring a couple of schools on supply, and I took a step. I sort of reassessed basically, and then when I had this international school experience, it was like, hang on a minute, right? I didn't need to do the things I was doing, but I was convinced and almost brainwashed into thinking that to be successful as a teacher, that's what I needed to do. It was almost like I was brainwashed into it, not just by government, but by the whole of the education culture that created this pressure pot of, unless you can reach these ridiculous levels, you are not good enough. And suddenly I went international, that was stripped away. And I'm guessing that you working in the Amazon warehouse is probably, albeit a very different context, a similar thing.
Yeah, it's and this is not to say that there are wonderful schools out there with wonderful leadership teams, and I was in 24 years. I was privileged that I worked in 3 fantastic settings that where I just loved working with the staff, and everyone was pulling together, and they were genuinely happy places, and the leadership were able to. I don't want to break any of your guidelines, but the leadership saw themselves as basically poo umbrellas. They
Well, yeah.
I would use a stronger word than that, but they basically were able to shelter some of the staff from some of the things that rained down from above. So there are many places like that, and I have worked in them. But I absolutely get your point about the culture that we have in this country.
I mean, what I said was more.
Mm.
I didn't say all.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
said more. It is more likely you will encounter that culture. And also, some of the things that exist in the UK do not exist in the international sector, Ofsted being one, which is, in my opinion, not the opinion of Teachers Talk Radio or even some of our other hosts, but in my opinion, is part of the sort of that part of that that thing that creates that culture of pressure and excessive pressure and excessive having to be superhuman every day, right? To survive, right? And that's my opinion. But anyway, either way, do you find you mentioned the pay with the Amazon warehouse?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about that side of it?
Yeah, having sat down and made the decision that I wasn't going to be, working in schools anymore. It was a case of, well, what is it that we need to survive and actually just to be able to live enough and to live a little bit more. And I'm without giving away too many things, my basic pay is equivalent, is outside of London, is equivalent to a teacher who's on about M3. But I work 40 hours a week. They've been trying to ring me tonight to come in because I'm not due to go into work till tomorrow night. But I have unlimited overtime, which I tend to, build up and have nice holidays with. It's the freedom that I have as having moved out and to do something that is completely different. It is the stress, and it's not something I really expected in many ways. I'm not expecting to love the work that I do, and perhaps to get some of the fulfillment that I had when I was particularly a class teacher, because I still believe that is one of the greatest jobs in the world. But there's a point where either kind of mentally and physically and emotionally you cannot continue, it's just little differences. Before I started listening to the program at the beginning, I'd done something that I would never do when I was in teaching, in that I was the one that cooked the evening meal, and I was present, and I was present both physically and mentally. 2 weeks ago, I had the joy. We went to Cornwall for a week. Term time holidays were a great thing, but during a holiday, when I was teaching, I would, particularly when I was in school leadership, I would have been secretly checking at what my emails. Is there anyone that's causing a bit of hassle? Have we got families for whom we've got something safeguarding has come up? There was never any downtime, and that's what I have now. Complete downtime, really, for nearly half of the week in action. There are other jobs that I looked at, and I thought, well, can I transfer my skills that I've learned in teaching and training and mentoring and communicating? Things didn't work out, but I've now got to the stage where I am one of the trainers for new hires that come in into the house. So I'm still, and people go, have you been a teacher in the past? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. It's like, you can't get, you can take the teacher out of the classroom, but they're still a teacher, deep down after all. It is difficult. I mean, I know the title of this is "Should I Quit Teaching?" and I would be the very last person to tell anyone what to do.
Yeah.
And I can only speak from my own personal experience, but I would say to people, is it the culture of your school and your locality? Do you have the freedom? I live in Gloucestershire, so Wales is a stone's throw away for me. But if you're in the middle of Birmingham or Norwich, you're not going to be able to go and work in Wales or Scotland. And many people are not going to be able to have the freedom to go and teach internationally as well. I recognise that, but
Yeah.
is there something you can do by going somewhere else first of all, if you still have the love for teaching? And if not, it is scary. You have to make some hard decisions. I don't underestimate that. I am the main earner in the household, and it has been, it's difficult and tough decisions have to be made. But it is possible. There is life outside teaching. We aren't indispensable except to those that love us the most.
And also there is sort of other options within teaching. So for example, me now, I'm part-time. I'm in a great school who will even swap my part-time days if they can. If they'll be very, very flexible with me, and they are so great in terms of like the guys I work with now. They just not in a bad way. They leave me to it. Right. I go in there, I teach, I go home, and they appreciate what I'm doing, and great, because that's what, at this stage of my career, that's what I want. Now, of course, I don't believe that a teacher should have to give up their desire to be a head of department and to be a senior leader and to be a head teacher to be able to have a life. No. I think that's our biggest problem, that people almost have to sideline what they see as their career ambitions to be able to actually just live, right? And that's not on. There needs to be a pathway. There needs to be a way that you can work full time and enjoy your job and have a life, regardless of what level you're working at, regardless of how high up the scale you get. And to be fair, there will be those who would also argue that the pinch point is at sort of middle and senior leadership level, potentially in many schools head teacher level. But then if you go beyond that, there'll be those who say, you get to CEO level. I'm not going to comment on that. There'll be many who would argue that there are pinch points within the system, let's say, where it becomes almost untenable to continue. So what I find incredible, Dan, and actually I was speaking to an ex-copper of five-a-side football just 2 weeks ago, who now earns more as an Uber driver than he did as a full-time police officer. But half the abuse and the sort of issues that he would encounter every day, and the paperwork and all the rest of it. Absolutely. I do think teaching within the public sector has had a really sort of there's a whole combination of reasons why teaching, particularly with COVID and everything and the societal changes, I'd say the closest comparator is probably the police and the NHS. I think, but even working with children coming out of this situation, it's a whole new ball game. So there's a lot to consider in there. I'm going to bring Ben in. Ben, do you want to contribute something to this?
Hi everyone. It's just quite interesting listening because I'm a first-time listener.
Hello, welcome.
Hello. I currently teach at an international school, and left the UK sector after being in various positions for the last 12 years. And you still do have the pressures, but I hear what you're saying. You almost feel, I always felt in the UK, I was like on the crest of a tsunami, that just as I was just getting myself sorted, something else would be coming into me. And that's talking from a senior leader point of view. And actually, I just decided to leave my job in December. I was SLT, music lead, phonics lead, early years lead. That's just too many hats, with half a day every other week out of class. And I just sometimes think there's, especially if you're not even new to teach, but new to a school, regardless if you're maybe senior leader or not, that schools maybe should think about a 3 to 6 month almost transition period for you to go into, so you get used to the administration procedures of a school, because there's so many documents and things that you have to fill out that you spend a lot of time trying to think, oh, how does this look at this school, if you understand what I mean. So for instance, I'm currently doing a data summary at the moment, and it's just interesting because I'm used to working in a very different way. I've worked in 3 schools, some in leafy areas, some not so. But I just decided December this was getting a bit too much, and cost of living in London. It was quite interesting listening on Question Time the other day about young people not being able to get on the housing ladder. I'm in my mid-40s and I'm not on the housing ladder. So even I was thinking the politicians were, you've missed the boat by decades, because unless you're willing to stay at home in your 20s, which I didn't do, and you're willing to, then save your money that way. And I don't even like avocados, when everyone uses that comment. And so I just felt that actually I needed to get back into what I really loved, and that was the teaching aspect of it. And I did not feel at all that I'd failed myself, and my mum was a teacher as well. And I just thought to myself, actually, I need to move closer to family, get out of this circle of what you're just saying about thinking it's normal to take my laptop on holidays. And because I think you start to accept a bit of that this is normal, and it sometimes takes people out of education to say to you, but why have you brought it? And there is sometimes when you were mentioning earlier about emails, a bit like you feel you've got to check them all the time. And I've made a decision in the last 2 weeks that actually I'm not going to, during the teaching day, look at my emails, because I'm also a full-time class teacher. Yes, I'm very lucky at this school. I get time out of class, which I should have done at my last one. And we actually have an inspection coming up next week, would you believe, at an international school. And it's extremely interesting to look at the pressures of a no-notice inspection against the pressures of a when it's actually going to happen inspection. Very, 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 very interesting, because you're preparing lots of documents and things because they are coming. I mean, we actually had a gentleman come and do a pre-inspection day and talk to us, and he was very reassuring. He actually said, I think you might actually enjoy the experience. I'm not quite sure people would say that. But I mean, I've been through 2 or 3, but I spent from January to May and March doing a little bit of consultancy work, doing some supply teaching in schools in the Northwest. I moved back to there, and I really fell back in love with the teaching. And I loved the aspects of the supply nature of choosing when I wanted to work, putting my absolute best into giving those children the time. Schools then would want you to come back, and you felt like you'd leave at 3:30, and you go, I can actually leave this at the door. This is not my thing. And it really got me back into the love of teaching. And I had that 6 months of spending more time with my nephews and family members. And I felt that I definitely, as a person, I wasn't on edge anymore. Like you were saying before about antidepressants, I was on sleeping tablets, because not necessarily because I worried about work, but I just procrastinated so much in my head and did not feel that I had the support, which I do have now, from my fellow SLT members. And and the safeguarding, if you're a safeguarding lead and part of that team, I don't think people understand the emotional baggage which comes with that.
Absolutely.
And it's something that really,
Well, I think you might have dropped there, Ben, slightly. I don't know whether it's just my end.
And then you just, obviously you wouldn't speak about it to people, and just know that you were having to make these decisions yourself and speak to the police and everything which goes with that, which just got too much to me. But fast forward 6 months now, I moved back to the Northwest, and 2 weeks later I was intrigued by an advert for a role in an international school. Never thought about going to international school at all. And
when you say an international school, Ben, you mean a UK based international school?
Yeah, UK based. I'm in Spain. So UK based. Use the UK use the UK curriculum.
Yeah, but you've moved to Spain.
I have.
Right.
I'm here in. I don't think I'm even going to put my radiator on. I feel really bad saying that to you all because my clothes just dry really quickly. I am, yes. So, and it's not something I've never, lived abroad, and it's just something that for me is different climate, and I'm just a better person now, and I'm quite. Maybe I've learned this through experience now. I'm more than happy to talk to my head of primary and say, look, if I find things are getting a bit too much, or I'm not sure what something looks like, I am a little bit direct sometimes in my tone. I will say, I don't know what that looks like. In my head, it might look like this. In yours, like this. Can I show you before? And you go, absolutely, yes. So I think it's important sometimes when you move to a job that you kind of just explain a little bit about what you're like as a person, how you work. Because I find that a lot of the times that people go, oh, I'm not sure how that, and then the deadline starts to loom, and then you start to get worried about it. But I don't, the whole working all the time thing, I do think it's a bit of and I'm, we all have people to answer to, and I do feel, I do always say, I do things like I won't schedule any emails in the evening, and I'll schedule them for in the morning. And so I don't want people, but it does seem to be a bit of a school thing at my school and all my schools in the UK that everyone seems to think it's you're going to check your emails and do work pretty much most evenings. And I don't know where we how that has become the norm in the teaching profession. I mean, with the Ofsted talk that you were just mentioning about Ofsted, I've had a few Ofsted inspections, but I've also been a little bit involved in kind of changing the narrative of Ofsted about how they go and approach some inspections as well. And I do think that when I read on social media sites and stuff, that there's a lot more positivity about Ofsted. Feel free to disagree, but particularly in early years, which is my specialty, there's a lot more positive comments about how the inspectors come and visit us in early years. Because a lot of the time before, it used to be they would openly say, oh, I'm not an expert in early years. And that used to really get us as educators, because well, make yourself an expert. But it now seems that with the change in the curriculum as well, that they're more than happy to. They don't want to see paperwork anymore. They want to talk to the children. They want to talk to you about what a child is like at your setting. And that seems to be a good way to go at the moment. But just, last point I'll make is going back to my, the inspection things. When I've gone through my inspection next week, it's just going to be really interesting to maybe write an article or do something about it, about the different pressures.
Well, you could come on a TTR show, Ben.
I could come on the TTR
a different
show
one and tell us all about it.
I've got
a number of hosts in, actually. They'd love to speak to you.
Oh, so, will they?
Absolutely. Sounds like a very interesting topic. I've got a number of hosts in here right now, a few anyway, who I'm sure would be chomping at the bit to talk to you in a couple of weeks about.
Yeah, sure. I really don't mind that at all.
It won't be me, Ben, because whenever I hear the word Ofsted, I get absolutely triggered and need sort of counselling sessions afterwards. So it definitely won't be me hosting.
And I mean, like, I just, for me, like, everyone always goes, oh, well, you're going to say these things about Ofsted because, I'm part of the Pedagogy and Practice Forum. But I've seen, like, all the, like, we come up with some of the questions to what we think inspectors should be asking, and I do the daily diet of teaching. When I applied to be part of this Ofsted role in 2018 and was successful, lots of people saying, well, it'll just be full of professionals and things. And if I'm completely honest with you all, that when I actually put my application to be part of this forum, I was very anti-Ofsted, and I told them in my application, I said, and you need people as part of this forum who are doing a daily diet of teaching and understand the pressures which goes with it. And it obviously worked. And I always look at it from a point of view, yes, I might be a senior leader, but I also I'm a teacher at heart. And if I think that things are things that need to be looked at or might need to be questioned, or I don't think that's a suitable thing to be asking, I would be the person making those points. So I'm more than happy to, like, say, I've got my 3-day inspection done, and that'll be great. But it does sometimes seem, just in education, final thought is that when you just think you're getting yourself sorted on something comes around like a performance appraisal, where I'm sure we'd all love an hour out of class getting on to start with stuff instead of just maybe having a meeting, or action plans, or governor reports, or data analysis, and I just think sometimes that it would be quite good if school leaders thought, actually, we're asking this. We're asking this. Let's make everybody be aware that there's a 2-week window where we are going to just, you will not be asked for X, Y, and Z. I know it takes brave leaders to do that, but if I ever become, a head teacher myself, that's one thing that I would be looking into bringing in, to being able to actually, so I know that my staff would be able to go, oh, this is the, whatever you want to call it, give it a nice fancy word, and go, oh, this is the week where, so unless it's an emergency or urgent, it's, you can just get involved in doing your teaching, because, when you're new to a school as well, and you're getting on top of everything, it's unfortunately sometimes being very personal here, it's sometimes you're teaching which can be the thing which isn't as outstanding as you can be, because you're having to do so many other things. You're looking after a whole new team as well. They're coming to you asking you lots of questions. Well, that's part of the job, and I understand and appreciate that. You want to do, you're in front of those 30 children, aren't you? And you're wanting to make sure that your teaching is absolutely as best as it can be, and know that, don't beat yourself up about stuff. And that's just something really that I'm just noticing at the moment. So I'm just making sure teaching is high quality. I'm there for my team. However, it will be interesting to see what the inspection is like, and what questions may or may not be asked, because they're not actually coming from the UK, they're coming from other areas as well.
Ben, sorry, I'm going to have to stop you there. I couldn't get in there, but thank you so much for calling in.
That's okay.
It was really interesting. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to go to Dan, just back to Dan briefly before we finish up here. Dan, what are the things you miss about being in teaching?
The staff teams. I said I was lucky enough to work in 3 really brilliant staff teams. I miss the day-to-day of working alongside them, and I do miss the children and teaching, actually in the class. There's a lot of the other stuff as well outside of that I'm just not bothered by. I'm lucky enough that I have been was in primary teaching for a long time, and when you find out that you've made some sort of difference to someone's life, and that you've done something which has sparked something in them, and you see that on a day-to-day in the classroom. But if you're lucky enough, when you're as long in the tooth as I am, I'm still in touch with one of my ex-students who we put her on stage when she was 9, and I was lucky enough to go and see her in a performance at the Edinburgh Fringe a few years ago. So it's that sort of long-term change that you make in people, but when you see that every day to day, little lights going on, children enjoying their learning. Yes, I do miss that, but that and working alongside some fantastic professionals and human beings, that's really the only thing that I miss. Everything else, I'm not so worried about.
Down the toilet. Did I mention, Dan, John Catt is back? John Catt is back with TTR, and if you visit johncattbookshop.com, you can get 20% off any book on their website. They've got lots of books on there. They've even got stuff on transitioning out of teaching, which is the topic we're talking about right now. If that's what you want to do, you can go to johncattbookshop.com. You can search for whatever the topic you want to look at is. And if you want to get this 20% off, all you have to do when you check out is put in JCTTR2324. You get 20% off the order straight away. So definitely check that out if you're interested in some PD books, or maybe something about what we're talking about now, maybe flexi working. They've got plenty on there about that. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things to consider. Huge thanks to Ben. Huge thanks to Dan for coming on. Huge thanks to Laurie, who came on this earlier as well. If you want to listen back to this, it'll be available as a podcast. So if you have a podcast platform that you use, just follow Teachers Talk Radio on there. What have you got to lose? We'll pop up whenever we release a new show, which is at least one a day. So we'll keep you with your diet of high quality CPD, along with content like this, where we talk about the reality of teachers. And the biggest thing that we can offer you is teacher-led shows. You know, our hosts are teachers. Our hosts are in the profession. They understand it. And of course, our guests are too. Apart from Dan, who works in an Amazon warehouse now. But, you know, it's amazing to hear, Dan, your story. And, you know, as I say, regardless of how bad you feel as a teacher, there is a way forward, whether that's in the profession or out of it. And it's not a weakness to be brave in any respect and say, this is what I want to do for me. That's not a weakness. That's just looking at it and saying, this is what I'm going to do for myself, for the good of myself, and maybe my family as well, or whoever it is. And that's what I'm going to do. And that's not weakness. That's bravery. That's self-analysis. That's being able to see things for what they are and not be wrapped up in what people might think, or what colleagues might think, or what the CEO of the trust might think, or what the head teacher might think, or what Ofsted might think, or what parents might think, or what whoever your mates might think, your teaching friends might think. No, for me, it's about you, and it's about how you feel and what is best for you. That is my final message. I feel like I'm trying not to take it back to church here. You know what I mean? Like the final little like homily. It wasn't intended to be like that, but certainly my biggest learning point is from my path is there was too many times where I did things for other people, what I thought they wanted me to do, or what I thought I should be doing, and what I thought was normal for me to doing, instead of saying, I'm not doing this, I'm going on a different path for me. It took me a while to figure that out, but once I did, I haven't really looked back. And since then, I'm still in teaching, but I've completely forged my own path with it. I'm no longer tolerant of the things I used to be tolerant of. I'm no longer willing to buy into it. Now, as Dan alluded to earlier, and Ben has alluded to, there are schools and leaders and contexts and ways of working within the profession that can accommodate that. But they can seem to be few and far between, but they are out there 100%. It's just a case of trying to find them. And if you can't find one, go on a different path. Maybe return later on. I think that at some point we are going to hit the dip, which is essentially that dip where it's like, we have not got enough teachers anymore because too many have left to go and teach abroad. Too many have quit the profession. Too many have dropped down from full-time simply because of the workload and no other reason. Too many are feeling like XYZ, are off sick or aren't able to work. We're moving towards that place. We may already be in it, but certainly we're getting further towards it. And with that in mind, it might be an opportunity in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, even 10 years, where you think things have improved, things are better, there's more PPA, there's better working practices, there's better, all these different things. Let's be positive to finish. These things might have to change because there may not be another option to not change them at some point down the line. And when they do, that might be an opportunity for someone who's thought, I've quit teaching, to actually think, maybe it's time for me to have another crack at it in a different context or whatever. So anyway, it's been a pleasure. A massive thanks to everyone for listening along. Really hope you've enjoyed this. TTR is live every day. Visit the website, ttradio.org. Get involved. Listen along. It's been a pleasure having you with us this evening. Thanks to all the guests.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.